Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are going to check out another of a line that I never fully finished reviewing. I actually had started out reviewing a large amount of these. These come from the Resaurus line, and there are 8 total, I believe. I have 5 reviews up on the channel already. I have the Tyrannosaurus Rex, the Giganotosaurus, the Velociraptor, the Deinonychus, and Triceratops. There are still 3 figures left in this line that I never reviewed. And again, I recently made a playlist for these figures, so if you want to check out the older reviews I did for those other figures, definitely check out the playlist here on my channel. But as you can see, we are going to take a look at the Stegosaurus today. These are by Toysmith, which you can see right here. I am not going to actually open this box. We're just going to look at it as far as what it looks like in the box, and then we'll take a look at the figure, because I do already have a figure of this out of the packaging, but I keep this one in the packaging because it is a bit of an older figure that you cannot purchase anymore, and the fact that it's still in package is pretty darn cool. You can see posable action dinosaurs over here, the Toysmith logo down there. This figure was actually, I believe, released in a few different lines over the years. It kind of transitioned from line to line, but all are now again discontinued. Nobody is making these anymore. You can see on the side here, you again have the species name as well as some information on the dinosaur, and then a shot down here of the figure. And then if we turn the box around, actually up there on the top, you can see again another shot of the figure and some more information. And then over here you can see we have a bendable tail, bite action jaw, rotating head, and movable legs. And what's hilarious about that is that's actually entirely untrue. Like, most of the line does have that, but the Stegosaurus does not. So they should have altered the packaging, because that is absolutely false advertisement, which we will see here in just a little bit. But you can see here on the back all of the other figures that are in this line. Again, as I said, most of I have already reviewed. You can see we've got the Deinonychus, which I absolutely love, the Stegosaurus, which we are currently taking a look at, the Tyrannosaurus, which is also really cool, the Giganotosaurus, which is also really cool, the Triceratops, which actually I just might as well say they're all really cool because they really are. But the Triceratops, again, I've reviewed here on the channel, the Velociraptor, and then the only 2 that I have left to review would be the Stegosaurus and Protoceratops. And what these are, again, are basically super articulated dinosaur figures before they were releasing super articulated dinosaur figures. They're almost like the beasts of the Mesozoic before the beasts of the Mesozoic was a thing. And I think they're really, really cool. Always have been a big fan of the figures. A lot of them have stability issues as far as the theropods, and like the 2-legged dinosaurs and stuff usually have like issues because the legs kind of crumble, but I haven't had that really happening with any of the quadrupeds, so that's good news, I guess, at least for the Stegosaurus. But again, now we've taken a look at the packaging, so let's go ahead, put this packaging back over here, and then we'll bring in the figure itself. So here is the base for the Stegosaurus, and that is a really nice looking base. You can see we've got some beautiful vegetation here. We have the species name right there on the front of the base, and again a nice little earthy area as well. Very nicely done. And then of course the Stegosaurus itself, and I will say it is a pretty darn big Stegosaurus figure. It actually sports some good weight to it as well, which is a plus, I guess, for the figure. It has a very strong, kind of almost like a rubbery real feel sort of to it, but again a bit of a harder sort of real feel. But I think the figure again is really cool looking, considering it is an articulated Stegosaurus like this. We don't even have a nicely articulated Stegosaurus now in 2024, although we will be having one at some point in the near future, because we'll be getting the Beasts of the Mesozoic version or the Cyberzoic version at some point. But again, it still to this day I think looks really cool. So as always, let's jump to a closer look at it and we'll check it out from there. So starting up here at the head sculpt of the Stegosaurus, you can see it looks pretty darn good. You've got some nice looking skin texture. You have a nicely sculpted out eye area. The eye itself is painted with a black, which also looks good. You can see the ear back here for the Stegosaurus as well. The beak is sculpted nicely, as you can see, kind of like some cracks and crevices within the beak. You also have a nice light, almost like a light greenish sort of a tone for the beak. And one thing about this figure, as you go through it, you're going to see a massive amount of color. They did not at all skimp out when it comes to the paint that they used on this Stegosaurus for the time. It's loaded with coloration. You may also see, a little bit of damage here and there on the figure. I'm not too sure how much it has because this one is a used one. Obviously, it's not the one that I have that's brand new, still sealed in the package. But as you move through, you can see a nice reddish tone for the upper part of the head of the Stegosaurus. You have like a black that sort of follows through. Then you've got like some orangish tones, and then you have brown on the underside. So just right there in the face, you've got 4 different tones of color, or actually I should say through the head, you have 4 different tones of color. You also actually have this light tone, so that's 5 if you count the beak coloration, 6 if you count, well, actually I guess that would still be the same. So black you've got for the eye, but 6 if you count the dry brushing, because there is actually a dry brushing with a grayish tone that you will see through a large amount of the figure. As you move back into the neck, you still see that reddish tone. You see more of that kind of dry brushing. You start to see the plates picking up here in the back of the neck. You can see some reddish tones as well as like yellowish and orangish tones starting to pop up there in the plates. You can also see down here we begin to pick up some greens. I'm not a huge fan of the green that's used on it as far as that tone, but I mean, it's alright, I guess. The skin texture continues to look pretty decent. You can even see a little bit of like musculature there to the neck, I think, of the dinosaur. As I said, there are no chomping jaws on this, so a little bit of false advertisement on the box. You can, I guess, push the jaw sort of closed because it's, you know, a little bit flexible. The neck can kind of move because it's flexible, but it doesn't stay in position. It's not like it's a wire neck or anything like that. As you continue to move down, again, you've got all of that coloration kind of blending here. You have the red kind of striping down, outlined with a black. You have the orangish tones, or like yellowish orange. You also have the greens sort of spotting here and there, and then the brown for the underside of the neck leading down into the chest, which looks okay. You can see, again, the skin texture does look really quite nice. Moving back up into the body, we continue to have that sort of design when it comes to the paintwork, where we have like that striping effect moving through. You can see the black becomes more intense in certain areas as well. As you lead down into the front leg, we have our very first spot of actual articulation, which is the leg goes forward and back very, very smoothly. We also have articulation in the elbow for the Stegosaurus, so giving you some nice posability for the figure. The parts do not swivel, they don't come out away from the body or anything like that, so just forward and back articulation. You can see we have like a brownish wash, it looks like, that's been added to the figure though, definitely helping to add a little bit of realism, I think, to the Stegosaurus. As you lead down, the toes look pretty nice. The nails are painted with the same similar tone of color we saw on the beak, and they do sport a gloss coat for the nails, which is a huge plus. As you lead back up into the stomach region, you can see a little bit more kind of like skin folding and wrinkling and stuff right there. More really nice texturing as you lead up, and you can definitely make out that kind of light dry brushing. I think it's a gray, kind of looks like a gray, but also at the same time maybe a slight hint of like a brown. But as you move up a little bit further, we get up into the plates, and the plates are so colorful. You can see we've got like some blackish tones. Then we lead up, we've got the reds, we've got yellows, we have greens. They are really, really colorful, and I think that definitely helps to give the figure a very appealing look. And we also have some nice detailing within the plates. Again, nice cracks and crevices, extremely, extremely highly detailed. Even areas where you can see that there are actual like injuries. You can see like a crack to the plate right there. That one's got a crack in the center, and then this one has a crack coming in here from the side. So love the small doses of realism that you find on these figures. As you move back, you can see the hip bone right there protruding from the skin on our Stegosaurus. As you lead down into the rear leg, again, we've got the same type of articulation we had on the front leg, where we can go forward and back, and it can actually move pretty far. Like, you definitely have some very, very nice, as you can see, posability with the figure. Then we also again have the knee, so you can articulate the knee really nicely. And as you lead down, you again have that brownish wash showing up within the yellowish tones that we have for the body. The knee is sculpted nicely as well. The muscle definition is displayed nicely in the legs. And again, the skin texture is very nicely done, very kind of elephant-like, I would say. You lead down, you can see the toes. Again, the nails are painted with that same tone that we saw on the beak and the front claws, and you can see again a bit of a gloss coat down there. And then we lead out here into the tail. Obviously, the plates begin to decrease in size as we lead out toward our thagomizers. The thagomizers do have a white tone, but it looks like most of the white tone on mine is kind of disappeared over time, I guess, because the figure has been used and abused a little bit. I don't know if that's how it looked originally, but definitely not showing the white tone too good nowadays. But they are, again, sculpted really, really beautifully. You can see some nice cracks and crevices within those as well. They could have probably been a little bit longer, but the tail as a whole, I feel like definitely could have been a little bit longer. But as you lead out through the course of the tail, you can see some skin wrinkling and stretching here on the back of the thigh leading up into the tail. You can see, again, that same type of patterning and paintwork moving out here into the tail as well. And then as you look down here, it kind of looks like we have an attempt at a cloaca as well, which is pretty interesting. But you can see the variations actually of brown. You have a lighter and darker variation of brown for the underside of the Stegosaurus as well. And then again, the tail is flexible, and I don't know if this one was meant to have a wire tail, but if it did, the tail doesn't stay for me at all. So I don't think it did have a wire tail. It's just very, very flexible. And of course, you're going to see pretty much the same thing over here on the other side. Not really any huge differences from one side to the other, but it is an absolutely awesome Stegosaurus. I have always been a huge fan of this figure. And wow, actually, look at how I just noticed how different the paintwork is from one side. So when it comes to the greens that you see over here, compared to the greens that you see in the stomach over here, that is drastically different, and I've never actually noticed that about this one before. I would imagine that's not something that you see on all of the figures, but still pretty interesting to see how different it looks from one side to the other. But again, as I said, I am a huge fan of this entire line, but specifically the Stegosaurus I've always really liked, because it's not very often we get a Stegosaurus like this that has very cool leg articulation and, you know, a flexible tail, flexible neck and stuff. So definitely a really cool figure. And then the base, again, you can see has some like nice ferns and stuff down here, really nice vegetation. We've got like a darker green and then kind of like a dry brushing with a lighter variation of a green. And you can even see that the vegetation kind of changes in color, because we go from this nice green, but it's a fairly dark shade, to a much darker shade of green over here. And again, that same type of dry brushing. You've got some down broken logs and stuff here throughout. You can also even see a lizard sitting over here that almost looks like he's deceased, because he's now kind of part of everything in here, but I think maybe he's just hiding in there, kind of camouflaging himself nicely. And then you lead over here, you've got a nice variation of color over here, again for the earthy area. You can even see some slight old dead ferns showing up down here. You can see there's like a greenish wash that's been applied, and then there's some nice brownish tones. You got rocks and stuff showing up here and there. So really cool base for sure. Again, that nice nameplate there on the front, just showing you that the overall presentation of these figures was really, really well done. Now, as far as a size goes for our Stegosaurus, you can see, as I've already mentioned, it does have a pretty good, impressive size. Lengthwise, you are looking at about 11 inches or around 28 centimeters. Now, height-wise, it's going to be pretty impressive. It is currently standing on the base, so maybe I'll pull it off the base and give you the actual height here, just kind of standing on the review station as I bend the leg and knock it over. Had to reposition him to get him standing correctly again. But height-wise, you were looking at closing in on 6 3/4 inches or around the 17 centimeter mark. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus Robert Muldoon, and the Collect A human being next to our Resaurus Stegosaurus, and you very much so can see, again, it does have a really nice, really impressive size to it. We've also got a Mattel Velociraptor and Dilophosaurus next to our Stego to further give you an idea of the size. Now, when it comes to Stegosaurus, most Stegosaurus figures are going to be a bit smaller than this one, but you can see when it comes to like the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World line, if you were to go back and grab any Kenner Stegosaurus, or of course in this instance we have the Mattel version, obviously these Stegosaurus are a bit larger than our Resaurus Stegosaurus. I think one of the very few Stegosaurus figures that can compete with this as far as a size goes would be maybe the Nanmu version. You can see the Nanmu Stego is actually really quite similar in size. A little bit smaller, but fairly similar in size to the Resaurus version. One thing that's definitely important to keep in mind, though, is that when it comes to the Resaurus figures, there are no scales associated with them. Like, they don't scale to each other correctly, because here's the Giganotosaurus next to the Stego, and we'll also bring in one of my favorites from the line overall, which would be the Deinonychus, and you can see the Deinonychus as well, again, is huge next to the Stego. So clearly they don't size up next to each other correctly. They basically just made super cool articulated dinosaur figures that are all a very similar size. So this Toysmith Stegosaurus, the Resaurus Stegosaurus, is a really cool figure, honestly. I absolutely love this. I think the only thing that I personally would have done to make this figure a little more fun would have been increase the tail length and then maybe give it like a wire tail where I can articulate it. Like I said, I don't think this one had the wire tail. Mine certainly doesn't seem to, but I could be wrong. But as a whole, I think the figure looks really cool. They've done a great job of sculpting it out, especially when it comes to giving the Stegosaurus that almost like mid-90s feel, the way that I feel like it was kind of portrayed back then. In like the mid-90s is pretty much the way that I feel like this Stegosaurus looks, and that's really cool because it's probably one of my favorite interpretations of Stegosaurus, like very similar to what you see in the Dinosaur Heresies in Robert Bacher's illustrations. I kind of feel like is sort of similar to what you see on this Stegosaurus, so that's one of the reasons why I think I like this one so much sculpt-wise, but also the paint is really, really cool. You know, you've got so many variations of color on this. They did not go lazy at all when it comes to the paint apps. They've applied washes and dry brushing and just tons and tons of color, and even given it a lot of flashiness up there in the plates. And the overall coloration, I think, is just so different compared to what you often see on Stegosaurus. So that's one of the reasons why I feel like this figure is so fun when it comes to the paint apps. And like I said, no laziness. You know, you've got painted nails, they've given them gloss coats, the painted beak, the eyes, everything is painted on this figure, and they spared no expense, I guess you could say, when it comes to the amount of paint used. The articulation is also really nice. You could, of course, implement more. We'll see that on the Beasts of the Mesozoic version that is coming out, but for its time, it sports more articulation than probably any Stegosaurus figure that had ever come before it, so definitely a massive plus as far as that goes. And the base is pretty much the icing on the cake, I would say, for this one. It's a little hard sometimes to find the bases for these figures. I actually still have to search for the bases for all of my theropods, but I actually still have to search for the bases for all four of my carnivores, but I think I might have all four. Well, I definitely have all of them for the herbivores except the Triceratops. I don't remember if I have that one. But the bases, again, can be a little bit sketchy to find, but if you can find them, they are a great addition, not only to the figure, but as far as the overall display goes. So if you are interested, I will try to find you guys a link to include in the description to where you can purchase one of these. It may be a little bit hard to find, and it also may be a little bit expensive, but if it's not too bad, I would definitely say it's worth it. So if you are interested, check the links in the description, grab this if you want it, and like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.